Good morning, good morning, good morning. Episode 79, Hoya Locker Room. This by far will be my favorite episode. We have Mr. Lee Reed in the building, Georgetown's reigning athletic director. And Lee, we can't say enough. We're extremely grateful for you stopping through the locker room. I'm going to give my esteemed co-host a moment to say a few words, but thank you, sir. We're looking forward to chopping it up with you.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Gene. Long overdue.
Lee, I just want to tell you, I know it probably sounded great to you when Gene said this is his favorite episode, but not to put any damper on you, but he says it every week.
Yeah. I've watched some of them. Yeah.
But I will say this. I think he might actually mean it this time because he cleaned up, looks like he got a haircut, and usually I can smell him through the screen. So I think he took a shower this morning.
Lee took everything about power not to wear a jacket.
I'm glad you didn't, my man.
So just to start things off, I want to highlight a few things, Lee. Under your leadership, Georgetown student athletes have excelled academically, consistently posting a department-wide cumulative GPA 3.2 and over. You successfully navigated the $125 million fundraising campaign. We saw an unprecedented $50 million commitment to establish the Cooper Athletics Leadership Program. Also under your watch, Lee, you negotiated a favorable 10-year deal with Fox Sports, tripling sponsorship revenues over the life of the contract. You also opened the doors in 2016 to the new 144,000 square foot state-of-the-art training facility, the Thompson Intercollegiate Athletic Center. Competitively, the Hoyas have remained prominent on the national landscape. 6 national championship teams, 28 conference tournament champions, and 4 head coaches receiving National Coach of the Year honors. You've more than elevated your role since you've been on campus, and we're forever grateful. So that's how we want to start this program, celebrating you from the onset. Markham, you can take it from here.
Well, I like to go with the first question we always ask anyone who has a Georgetown connection, and that is, how did you end up at Georgetown?
Yeah, thanks, guys. Gene, Markham, before we get into sort of this conversation, which I'm looking forward to, I just want to send my prayers to Dikembe, Rose, Ryan, and the entire Mutombo family. We all heard the news yesterday that he has some health challenges ahead of him. I know both of you, as well as the entire Hoya Nation, are behind Dikembe and supporting Dikembe and sending prayers his way. So that news was not the news we all wanted to hear. So with that backdrop, I also want to recognize both of you for your work in terms of the Hoya Locker Room. This is episode 79, and you were instrumental, or have been instrumental, in keeping our community together, keeping our community talking about basketball, which is extremely important to all of us on the hilltop, especially as we went through the pandemic. And so the work you guys are doing, along with some others out there in Hoya land, it's really important, man. And so I really appreciate you guys stepping forward to do this. So it's easy for me, man. 2009, I've got a lot of family that live in the Washington, D.C. area. My mother's here, a lot of cousins. Last week you had Mark Edwards on. He is very good friends with my cousin, Roger Hilton. So they grew up together. So there's a lot of history in my family here in the nation's capital. But in 2009, my mom was sick and was admitted to GW Hospital. And that summer, I spent a lot of time here in DC caring for my mom as she was going through her health battles. And thank God she got through that. She's still around, lives out in Landover, Maryland. But the point being, when the time I spent here that summer, when my family was here, we just took a drive over to Georgetown, right? We just kind of just kind of trying to kill some time, we went over to Georgetown, and I showed my kids Georgetown because Georgetown is Georgetown. And never thought in a million years that I would ever have opportunity, nor was I even considering ever coming to Georgetown. I was happy where I was at Cleveland State University. I believe strongly in totally different missions in terms of institutions, but I believe strongly in the mission of Cleveland State University. Obviously, I went to school there, played ball there, so I had an affinity for it. But it was truly a place with open admissions that and access to higher education that changes lives, man. And so that was important work that I was doing there. And I've always felt that as long as you're with people who are aligned with what you're aligned with, or trying to do the things you're trying to do, then the name of the school, the name of the conference, the size of the budget, those things don't matter as much. So fast forward later on that summer, August, September, I got a call from a search firm. I'm sitting in the parking lot in Cleveland, Ohio, and I get a call from a search firm, and they mentioned, would you have interest? They asked me if I would have interest in going to Georgetown. And I was like, and I knew what it, obviously in the business, it's a small world. And I sort of knew you were in transition in terms of your athletics director position, but I yes and no. I'm like, I understand that maybe somebody gave you my name, but the reality was I had no interest in Georgetown University at the time because we still had work to do. We were coming off NCAA tournament. We still had a lot of work to do where I was. My family was there. My wife's from Cleveland, so I was good. And I also understood sort of how this thing works, right? Somebody calls you, they nominate you, and they've got to check the box. So I said, consider the box checked. You can move on with your search. And after a couple of hours, when they sort of laid it out in terms of the mission and what they were trying to get done over the next 10, 20 years, I said, well, there's nothing in there that I didn't think I could accomplish, that coming here and adding value was something that I could do. And so that whole process went on for almost a year, literally.
Oh,
like
wow.
From August 2009 to I started, I think my first day was May 10th, 2010. So, right, that's a long process. And the process played out the way it played out. But during that time, as I was considering it, I called all my people in DC. I called my mother, and what I was concerned about is
Due diligence.
to be real, is I'm a guy from Cleveland State University. Access to education is big. I come from where I come from, just like a lot of us. And so I didn't know enough about Georgetown, the place, to really understand. I knew Georgetown, the basketball program, Gene, because of what y'all had accomplished. And we're about the same age. I'm probably a little older, but I knew Georgetown through its basketball program. I knew it was a great academic school. I mean, that's easy. But what I was concerned about is behind the basketball program, what kind of people were on the hilltop, right? And so the thing if there's anything in my life that I don't want to use the word despise, but I'll use it. So please keep it in context, is people that are entitled. And so I really thought long and hard about, do I want to come up to a place where people think they're better than me, better than my family, better than whatever. I've never been about that, man. I've been about, you got to go out here. When we play ball, man, that's what it is. You can come from wherever you come from in this world, but when you cross that line, you got to bring it. I don't care who ranks you. Gene, what I'm talking about. I don't care where you come from. When you cross that line, there's a level playing field in a sense, and you've got to compete. And so anybody that I thought who was entitled or people like that, I was like, nah, I'm not about that life. And so after talking to my family, I was educated. My mom said, nah, that place is not like that. It's important to the DC community. And I've talked to my cousins and talked to a lot of people about coming here. And then I got excited about the opportunity. And then it obviously, as you're going through that process, you start to think, I played basketball. Basketball has meant everything to me in my life. It was the vehicle. It has been the vehicle that has provided for me and my family my entire life, one way or another. I love the game. Why not go to the premier basketball-centric program in the country? When you think about it, Georgetown, when you think about there's the big state football schools, and if you want to get into that, that's the route you take. But I had made the decision that a place like this, one that where the community loved the game of basketball the way I do, was a place I could see myself furthering my career. And obviously, it's an amazing thing, Gene, because all of y'all that came through, starting with Bebe and that group, even before Patrick got here, right? Even before you got here, watching Bebe and what they were doing when we could see them on television, because it wasn't like the late 70s wasn't like it is today. It was like, why wouldn't I want to be a part of that tradition, history, and legacy, not only from a basketball standpoint, but for what it means to Black people, for what it meant to Black people, right? I mean, that's real. And so I was like, if there were a place that I would go and want to go, it would be Georgetown University. And so then I got excited about the opportunity to come here, right? Understanding that there were a lot of questions in the next 10 years that were going to have to be answered, right? Because this thing's moving fast. This thing, college athletics, the evolution of where this thing is going, the emergence, and football's always been important, but we knew right back 10 years ago, 13 years ago, I guess now, you kind of knew that there was tension between football schools, basketball schools, and the Big East had both, and they were under the same umbrella, right? And it was like, I knew that conference uncertainty was there. And so I knew I'd have to be the one that be a part of a team that figured all of that out, along with everything else that's moving. You know, the world was changing quickly. So I say all that to say that man, it was a blessing to have the opportunity to come to Georgetown University. I think we've done some good. I don't think we've scratched the surface.
Hold. Let me stop you right there. There's no think about.
I was going to let him go, but I'm glad you stopped.
No think about that.
You had to think about that.
I just want more of that.
I want to digress for 1 second.
Go ahead.
I'm not going to let you skip over the Cleveland State. I'm not going to let you skip over the fact that you hooped. Career 9 points, 2 assists. 3 assists, 2 rebounds a game. Your senior year, you had a great senior year. You are in the Cleveland State Hall of Fame for administration, but I'm sure they don't forget the ball. They don't forget the work on the court. 2007, 2008, I think it's called the McCafferty Award for the best school with the most team championships. You took Cleveland State to another level. So whether you thought you were on the radar or not, the work you did at Cleveland State speaks for itself.
And I'll say this, Lee, at 9 points a game, I don't know what the stats are, but I'm pretty sure that's at least 8.5 more points than Gene averaged.
Yeah, but
you see why we work so well together, Lee?
I see. I kind of thought that.
So fam, clearly the work you were doing at Cleveland State did not go unnoticed. Yeah. You were the 4th AD there. Yeah. Right. So clearly, you left the bar pretty high there, and to come to Georgetown as only the 17th AD, you're number 17. That's a lucky number for us. Yeah. And we're gonna laud you. Like I said, we've been waiting for you, and we're so glad that you came through the door. But the work you did at Cleveland State led you to Georgetown, and you continue to do work here that to me is unprecedented, and we can't thank you enough, Markham.
Well, touching on that, what would you say while you've been at Georgetown have been your biggest challenges and your most surprising accomplishments?
Yeah. Again, I appreciate the flowers that you guys are.
Yeah, but you're not one to accept them. So just answer the question, sir.
But Gene, you know what? Look, you know this, man, and both of you, Markham, you know this too, because you guys been around it at the highest levels. Nothing good happens without other people in a team setting. There's never one individual. It's always a team setting. And I think anything that we've done either at Cleveland State or certainly at Georgetown University is because we've got a lot of good people, man. We've got a lot of good student athletes. We've got a lot of great coaches. We've got an administration and President DeJoya that believes in athletics and what we're trying to do. And I'm not saying that just because that's what ADs are supposed to say. I'm saying that as somebody who's played on teams my entire life and never, ever lose focus of that. That's important. This right here, this is sort of a team setting, and we're trying to go through this. And so I would tell you, man, I've never looked at the challenges and accomplishments. I've never taken any time at all to say, okay, this has been good. We've been able to accomplish a lot. I think people talk about legacy. I don't give a damn about legacy, frankly. Somebody else is going to kind of talk about that. My life is pretty simple, man. Every single day I drive on that campus. Every single day I drive on that campus. I just try to move the ball forward just a little bit at a time. And the question is, when you leave that campus, what did we do today? Me personally, us collectively, whether we're here, our fan base, our alumni, our loyalist donors, what did we all do to make Georgetown better for the students and our student athletes in our case, right? And so for me, when we turn out the light every night, it's about that. And then I guess over a period of time, you look back and say, yeah, there were some things we accomplished. I would also say we've had some challenges that we're in the middle of or that we've tried to overcome. You can't get through this thing without both, right? And so, yeah, I'm proud to see our student athletes graduating at a high rate. I'm proud to see that we have, through this sort of pandemic recently, when we were able to establish the first ever director of equity and inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that position, that was meaningful to me and meaningful to us as a community, because it's another major tangible step forward to, again, making sure Georgetown is a place where everybody feels welcomed, everybody feels like they've got a real chance, right, at the dreams that they want to have, and that you do it in an environment where you feel valued, man. And so, again, that sounds like AD speak, but at the end of the day, man, that's what it's all about. That's absolutely what it's all about. I'm looking forward in terms of what we can do in this next campaign. We're in the silent phase of another campaign, and we still have more work to do in a lot of areas, but you know, providing scholarships for our student athletes, being able to retain and attract great coaching talent. The facilities, you know, we have challenges, right? Because we're on 104 acres and we're trying to do an awful lot. Think about it, 747 student athletes, 30 varsity programs, one of the biggest athletic programs in the country. We do that because it's a part of who we are, but it's not easy. And so trying to move everybody forward in a way that gives everybody a chance to get a championship ring and get a degree from Georgetown, that's the most important thing moving forward in the next 5 to 10 years. So from that standpoint, man, it's just more of advocating for our student athletes. It's more of pushing our program forward, because taking the job was easy, fellas. Y'all left a high standard behind. No matter what I did.
And again, you've created a higher standard.
Yeah.
You brought about some things when you were just speaking that, you know, that I wanted to touch on anyway. But just what you've been able to do with the other sports at Georgetown, with Georgetown being so basketball dominant, I want to touch on your philosophy. And again, I follow you obviously in social media, and I think you're a really good follow as ADs go.
So you're the one.
I'm stalking you. I'm stalking you.
It's just you.
It's just me. So I want you to touch on winning is fun. And then the one that I really love is athletics, the programs that are student athlete centered, coach driven, and administrator assisted. If you can touch on those two, and as you're touching on those two, just think about what has happened with Georgetown soccer program. I am a Georgetown soccer fan. I'm rabid, both men's and women's, and you have a lot to do with that, sir. You put that on your back. So if you can touch on that a little bit with those two backdrops, I'd love to hear your thought process, because we're a national powerhouse in soccer, my friend. Let's make that clear.
Yeah, no,
Not happening on your watch.
Yeah, no, I think again that let me start with sort of the student athlete. I mean, Georgetown, a student athlete centered, coach driven, and administrator assisted. I stole that from somebody a long time
That's
ago.
okay.
I can't even remember who I stole it from. So
I stole it from you, Lee.
Hey, if they're listening, credit to them. My apologies. But when I first heard that, it was like it was the one thing that encapsulated, summed up what I wanted to be as an athletics director, and that was number one, that I wanted to be part of athletic programs that put student athletes first in terms of what we do, and every decision we make hopefully is in the best interest of our student athletes. Now, it doesn't always come across like that, because this thing is nuanced and it's difficult, but our intent is always that the decisions we make relative to budget and time and personnel, all of those things, it's always about our student athletes, right? And so that's first. Second, I would say that successful programs are really coach driven. And so you touched on sort of the soccer programs. We're blessed to have two of the best coaches in the country, in Dave Nolan and Brian Weiss. And I didn't hire either one of those guys, but I think what we've tried to do is create in the last 13 years is to create an environment for them where they felt like this is where they could do their best work and win championships. And so with where we are in terms of budgets and finances, there's always somebody out that's willing to spend more money than you may have at the time. And so we've tried to create an environment where the money is important, yes, but them having a place where they could do their work and be successful at the highest levels, or have the chance to be successful at the highest level, that's important. And again, that's all of our staff in terms of how we support our coaches, all of our coaches, and our student athletes. But coaches, to me, Gene, are no different than they're educators, they're teachers, right? They're faculty members. And I think sometimes that gets lost, that our classroom happens to be the basketball court or the pool or the pitch. Doesn't matter. Those life lessons that are being learned on those teams in those moments under significant pressures and duress in public, those are some great life lessons that are being learned. And so all of our coaches are really the ones that are on the front lines making that happen. And then the third component to that is the administrator assisted part. That's where we come in, creating sort of that framework for our coaches, our faculty to be successful, right? And again, man, this thing is too complex. It's too big for it just to be the AD or just to be about the coach. There's a lot of other people that impact winning and losing on a daily basis. And a lot of people that sit outside of our department. So Georgetown could not have done and could not do what we do just by the people sitting in McDonough. We need admissions, we need housing, we need food service, we need our caps, we need the faculty, we need the provost. Everybody has to buy in at Georgetown for us to compete with schools that have 4 times our budget, 5 times our budget. Think about that. That's the Hoya factor, right? When you get everybody aligned, top to bottom, sideways, pulling in the same direction. Now, sometimes the results aren't where you need them to be. And I'm sure we can talk about that. But at the end of the day, just to have a chance, you've got to have everybody at your institution pulling in that same direction.
You said something, and I'm sure it's been said that way before, but when you said the Hoya factor, see, for me, Lee, being a part of Georgetown, the Georgetown family, what that means to me is the challenges are what make us. So what may appear to be insurmountable or dysfunctional, or everybody has a reason, or right, we embrace that. And I don't know if that, because I'm raised in the 70s, came to Georgetown in the 80s, and the challenges were, they called it the hilltop for a reason, because you were going uphill for me. So, but I think that's what makes us Georgetown.
Yeah.
Like, we're not, we understand that where our starting point is, but we still gonna bring our A game, and we're still gonna be successful, and we still gonna show up. And the things that people complain or find challenging about our program, I've embraced those for 40 years. And that's the fabric. So that's the Hoya factor. And I'm going to use that going forward. So thank you. I'm stealing from you again.
No,
yeah. Right. You talked about.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry, Mark.
When you talked about the challenges and sometimes the results aren't where we want them to be, and you mentioned that when you came here, part of your process was, why wouldn't I want to go to the place with the premier basketball program? And certainly when Gene was there, we reached that peak. Even though maybe it's because of the pressures, he got hurt and he missed the game. But
I watched that
every episode, Lee.
I know.
Every episode.
I know.
but clearly we have, as far as basketball goes, we have struggled in recent years, and given the disappointment of last season, not winning the game in the Big East, what are some of the things that you think need to be done to turn it around, and how long do you think it will take us to turn it around for us to return to the top?
Yeah, no, I again, when we talked about coming on, I think that with everything we've talked about up to this point, we can't not talk about sort of the thing that for our community has the most impact, and that's our men's basketball program. It is, when I came here, and again, I've got Coach Thompson behind me. He's always felt like he's behind us, right? But I one of the blessings of coming here was the 13 years, 12 years, I guess, that I had the opportunity to. Most people have read the book now, but I heard those stories firsthand, and I got a PhD in Georgetown and a PhD in racial justice and a PhD of what it was like to be a Black man on the hilltop when nobody cared about Georgetown basketball. And was he perfect? No. Are any of us perfect? No. But the legacy, and again, not just him, Gene, you were part of that, Markham, you were part of that. Everybody that contributed to that, to create a standard that we're all judged by, that's a responsibility that I knew coming here I had to embrace. And so I can assure you that all of us are disappointed in terms of where we are today, starting with our head coach, Patrick Ewing, right? But we're leaning into that. We're embracing that. So don't think that this is not something that's on my mind literally every single hour of every single day in terms of what we need to do in terms of helping our basketball program get back to where we want to go. I will say that Coach Ewing, your question about how soon, I don't know how soon, but I'll tell you this, I think Coach Ewing has been very, very open to evolving as a basketball coach, as a college basketball coach. I think he's made some pretty good strides. I think that's reflected by the optimism that we have going into this season. And again, we still have a lot to prove, but there's just a little bit of momentum heading into this season for a lot of different reasons. But I do think none of us are satisfied with where we are. By the way, the criticism, it's all deserved, right? Because there's a standard here. You don't come here and not embrace that. Whether you're a player, an administrator, or a coach, you can't walk through those doors of the Thompson Center and not embrace the responsibility and the pressure that you have to make sure Georgetown's one of the dominant programs in this country. You just can't do it.
I'd add to that the guy making the Gatorade and washing the jock straps too.
Absolutely.
Every episode, Lee. Every episode.
Well, I tell you what, here more than any place I've ever been, Markham, you were a manager, right?
Yep.
But your role here.
Excuse me, Lee. Manager of the year 3 years in a row.
There you go. Big time. But here, because of the culture that was created, everybody was important to the success of the team. And here, more than any place I've ever been, everybody has that responsibility, but also as a part of the program. And so it's not like I'm on this with Markham. You didn't play, but you were just as critical to the success of our program as any player.
And he got cursed out like he played.
And he got cursed. Yeah. And from what I understand, he might have got left a few times, right?
I never got left.
Okay, you didn't get left? All right. All right.
I was too scared to get left. I showed up on time.
But back to the reality though, man, we're not where we want to be. We've made some changes. I think those have been documented. I think I think we've got a chance to make some significant strides this year. We all understand the responsibility. The criticism is real. It's warranted. And I mean, we don't shy away from that. That's real. I mean, we're not where we want to be, and it's up to us. It's up to me to support Coach Ewing, support the student athletes. It's up to the staff. We've got to all do what we need to do to get us to the next level. The thing about where we are now is there's so much that is changing in the world of college basketball and college athletics. And Gene, I've heard you talk a little bit before about name, image, and likeness, the transfer portal, all of the things that are unprecedented change over the last even 3, 4, 5 years that we're having to navigate and do it in a way that's consistent with our university mission, right? So we've never been about paying players. We've never been about doing things that other programs were out there doing. But to your point, Gene, just like you said, that didn't stop us from wanting to be excellent and to be the best out there. And so that same mentality has to be what we're about moving forward. So I think we can get this thing. I know we're going to get this thing changed. I know Coach Ewing is committed to it. The staff is committed to it. The university is committed to it. Certainly I'm committed to it. So in terms of how soon, it's hard to put a number on it because we know what the expectations are, but we're moving in that, we're trending in that direction.
I know it hasn't been easy. If anything, I think your success or the university's success with the other programs, the other sports, has been a blessing in disguise. And, you know, again, me being from the basketball program, hopefully we're attending their games because we can learn something about what they're establishing. I think that's been evident. I mean, I've seen a lot of camaraderie amongst the other teams through social media. I also want to give a shout out to Georgetown social media. I think it's gotten remarkably more aggressive in the last couple of years. And that was part of our mission statement internally. We wanted to increase the communication. So if anything, the university can learn from what we're putting out.
Yeah, no doubt.
Directly, indirectly, however it's managed. And with that being said, please feel free to hit us anytime If you think there's some things we can be doing better, because again, this is all family, internally or externally.
Yeah.
A question I have for you, Lee, and this is for
By the way, before you go to your point, again, it's been, we may not be the best out there doing it, but I think even over the last 4 or 5 months, you've seen, now that COVID, I think you're starting to see some change. But as we go through in terms of this campaign and our strategic priorities as a department, what you just said is a priority for our department. We have to get good at social media, technology, storytelling, creative content. We understand we're not where we need to be, but here's why. It's important in terms of having that infrastructure to support our student athletes as they build their brands. So we have to get behind that. It will be important to us in our next TV contract. Think about the Big Ten. They signed $1 billion plus contract, but a lot of it is streaming. The NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, they're all going that direction. So having the infrastructure, the equipment, the resources, and the people to focus on this, unlike we've ever done before, that's one of the top priorities of our department. And again, it goes back to how are we telling the story of our student athletes, or allowing them to tell the story, right? And so we see that as a priority. I think our team is fast to work doing it, but we need to, it'll be something you'll hear a lot more about. So thank you for what you guys have done. Yeah. But we know we have to improve that. And that's across, if you ask 21 of our coaches,
all of them would say the same thing.
They'd say the same. It would be 1 or 2. Yep.
And to that point, Lee, do not hesitate in the meantime, as you guys are growing that infrastructure, to utilize what we currently have. Because again, we know the train is not going to stop.
Yeah.
And with guys moving around we may only have them for a year. Yeah. We want to put them in obviously the best position that we can, not only for them, but for the guys that's coming behind them. But the question I had for you, Lee, was more along the lines of, and this should be helpful for our student athletes, because I'm sure after the 81, 82, or 82, 83 season, you weren't thinking, I'm going at Cleveland State, you weren't thinking I'm going to be the AD at Cleveland State.
Right.
So I want to talk about that transition from being a student athlete to your post-athletic career, to your business, your graduate school, and then having to going back to your alma mater, and now being an AD for the second time. What was all that like for you? And if you can describe that journey, it'd be dope.
Yeah. Lee, before you go into that, Lee, I just want to say that I'm super offended by what Gene just said. How does he know? That speaks to the people he was hanging around, what he said, when he said, you, while you were at Cleveland State, weren't thinking about being the AD. You could have been thinking about being the president.
I'll let y'all.
Well, if he was thinking about it, Markham, he'd be president. Lee,
look crazy.
Every episode, Lee. Every episode.
I know. That's what makes it great, though. It's called chemistry. Yeah. No. So yeah, it certainly wasn't a straightforward path. Mm-hmm. Back when we played, Gene, there were very few role models. Mm-hmm. In terms of athletic administration or coaching, right? And so we had on the hilltop one of the best ever. There was Cheney, there were a couple of others, but we just didn't have a lot of role models. So I didn't understand that there was a entire business behind the game. We always chase the game, right? And then we take that as far as we can take it. For me, by the way, it wasn't very far. But I played with some guys that played in the league for a while. We had some pretty good talent at Cleveland State, with Frank Edwards, who went to the Sixers, first round pick, won the title back in the early 80s. Darren Tillis wound up being a first round pick for the Celtics. Jimmy Luss played a long time in the NBA. We had some guys that made that next level. So but certainly I didn't understand that there was a business behind the sport or behind the game. And so coming out of school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And it was because of my coach, Larry Shiat, who invited me out to, he had left. He'd recruited me to Cleveland State, then he left to go out to the University of New Mexico, and I transferred and finished school at the University of New Mexico, which is where he introduced me and got me involved in the coaching and being part of that coaching staff, where Gary Colson was the head coach, and Greg Graham and Scotty Duncan, who works for the Phoenix Suns now. There were a lot of great coaches out there, and I was able to get my feet wet in terms of next steps in my career or life, because of Larry Shiat and him pulling me out to New Mexico. Then I went into private business for about 8 years. My uncle, Wilson Rogers, was World War II, and not a day, guys. Let me tell you, not a day in college, the smartest man I've ever met in my life. And so he built a business, and it was McDonald's restaurants. And he was ready in the 70s when McDonald's was forced to integrate their ownership practices. He was ready and prepared to step in and bought a few McDonald's. Anyway, he needed somebody to help him run those restaurants. And I did that for 8 years. And I've told this to the Georgetown MBA students when they've asked me to speak. I got an MBA working at McDonald's. The understanding the business, that was an amazing 8 years for me. It also made me understand that I didn't want to do that the rest of my life. So I went back to New Mexico in the early 90s and got my master's. And that's where I transitioned to the administrative side. And because of a lot of good people helping me along the way, I started my administrative career in the early 90s and did whatever it took really to break into this business. Gene Smith helped me get, and Tim Weiser, they helped me get to Eastern Michigan. Gene Smith, who to me is
Ohio State, right?
Yeah, he's
the guy.
Wait. Let's distinguish.
Yeah.
Smart Gene Smith.
It's
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah.
Not the Gene Smith that hangs out with the
that's right.
Gatorade
Yeah. Gene Smith, Ohio State, the Ohio State University. So him and Tim Weiser, I mean, he was the guy you looked to on the administrative side. So, he had worked at Eastern Michigan after, Notre Dame and was the AD there.
I'm going to interrupt you, Lee. You are now the guy to look to in the administrative position.
Now, fortunately, there are a lot more.
Yeah, there are a lot more, but again, I like the guy we have. Yeah, so I'm saying you're a guy that look to in this administrative position. That's why I wanted to ask, like, how your journey took shape.
No, I appreciate you.
As you can see, Lee, we have a surprise guest here. If Mark Guerrero will reveal himself.
My man.
What's up? He's the president of the Hoop Club and a good guy, but not the smartest guy. Like we're not
going here, Marco.
I sent Mark a certified letter saying, when you come on, take your name off and put surprise yes, and he did not follow directions. He did not do it. And this is the guy, Lee. I don't know if you caught the episode when he was on. But
here we go.
You played,
Gene. Didn't I have a condition?
Yes, you did.
You played, Gene. Lee. You played basketball at Cleveland State. And by the way, I can't let this go by. I know you just missed Mouse McFadden, but I'm guessing you might have his phone number.
Yeah.
Call him up and tell him there's a guy that made Gatorade and washed jocks at Georgetown who wants to meet him in the low post.
Lee, every episode. Every episode, Lee, every episode.
But we wanted to bring Mark on because you guys obviously have a very special relationship, and he thinks very highly of you, and he doesn't know that David Wingate was not a power forward, but he's a good guy.
What's up, Mark?
How you doing, Lee?
I'm good, man.
Thank you guys for having me. I was saying to myself earlier, geez, of all the surprise guests you guys might have on this show with Lee, I got to be at the bottom of the totem pole. It's great to be here.
No, it's good to see you, man.
So Mark, if you could share a couple of Lee stories that our public would appreciate, preferably some when he's pulling his hair out, because I'm trying. He's always coughed. He's always nice and neat. It must be the military. It must be your peoples in the military. They kept you correct. But if you could share a couple of stories about Lee that'll, shed some light for our listening, the few listeners we have, to, talk about this guy, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. You guys have probably all heard me say this. I say it to Lee all the time. He is by far the best dressed AD in the country. He's always sharp. He's always, like you said, he's coiffed. He's on top of his game. He's always on his game. Lee and I have had a lot of fun times. We've traveled with the Hoyas around the world, to Italy, to Hawaii, to the Bahamas, to Jamaica. We're going back to Jamaica in a month. Literally a month from tomorrow, I think, is when I head out, at least. So we've had a lot of good times. Lee is a true leader. I know that the student athletes all look up to him, but as a friend, I can't speak more highly of him. He's just a great guy. He's committed to all of his friends, and he's truly committed to Georgetown. He's a lot of fun to travel with, great person to share a meal with, and I'm just fortunate that he's here at Georgetown, and I can consider him a very close friend.
Excellent. You got any questions for him?
Questions for Lee?
No, I'm asking Markham if he has any questions for you in regard to Lee.
Questions for Mark? Well, no, I don't have any questions for Mark.
All right, so we can get off this. Yeah.
Yeah. See, the guests get kind of uncomfortable when they're being given their flowers, but we're not gonna wait till you leave us, Lee. If that, hopefully that never happens, But
yeah, no, we all have a lot of work to do, man. And
yes, sir.
We're serious about that work. We need to, we have work to do. So I appreciate this, though.
Lee, let me ask you this. You were talking about your journey, and I thought about, I don't know, do you know Tim Duncan, who's the AD at UNO?
Oh yeah, TD.
So I always tell people,
Memphis.
Right. I tell people all the time that I taught Tim Duncan everything he knows about basketball. and I people always think I'm talking about the Spurs Tim Duncan. And I say, no, I'm talking about the original Tim Duncan, because Tim Duncan and I went to school together, starting elementary school. And I bring him up because, I was kidding with Virginia about saying what you were thinking about when you were at Cleveland State, but what advice would you give to someone who wants to be the next Lee Reed? How would you direct them to put themselves in position to become an athletic director?
I would tell them to aim higher, number one. But Tim Duncan, I didn't know you went to school with Tim Duncan, man. Yeah. He's doing a great job in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. He's one of the fast rising stars in our business, man. He's just got a magnetic personality. He understands the business, played at a high level with Penny Hardaway and that group. Just knows how to get things done. I think they have they're in the process of sort of evaluating whether or not they're going to add a football program. It's like, and I kind of went through that same process at Cleveland State. Ohio and Louisiana, very similar in terms of the importance of football to the people from those states. And it's almost like if you don't have one, what are you doing? What kind of school would not have a football program? And so I admire from afar what Tim's doing. He was one of the leaders that a couple of years ago when we were going through sort of the pandemic and the George Floyd, and our student athletes were reacting to what's going on in the world. We put together the Black Athletics Director Alliance, and we met literally every week for a year, just talking about how we could use our voice to support our student athletes. And also, how could we use our voice in terms of, and our leverage in terms of making sure that there's a pipeline for people to access this great industry, man. There's no better career than working in higher education and working with young people. And again, the business of sport is part of it, but I get a chance to go on campus like every day. I mean, let's be real, man. You were there 4 years. I'm there like we just had parent weekend, right? And so I would tell people that be sure heading into, where we are, it's a fast evolving business. But I would say you just need to make sure that regardless of how you got there, that you're putting student athletes first, and the other stuff sort of falls into place. But you've got to be student athlete centered, in my opinion, to be in this business. But, whether it's law degree or MBA, in terms of educational background, all of those things are important. It seems like I'm with attorneys more than I'm with coaches anymore, but that's just the nature of the business anymore. I just love it. It's not a 9 to 5. It's a lifestyle, man. It's a vocation. You are this job. And it's a huge sacrifice. And if you don't get into this business to become wealthy, that ain't gonna happen for most of us, right? And so it's just a matter of, are you passionate about it? Do you love it? Not do you love watching basketball and getting good seats at the Hoya's games? That ain't what this shit is about. This is more about like the grunt stuff that goes on, behind the scenes, So yeah, I think. And what I would love to see is many more student athletes like Tim Duncan that have that lived experience coming into the business, because even though it's evolving and changing, and my lived experience 30, 40 years ago is different than the kids today, at least there is some commonality there that you can sort of reflect and understand what they're going through. So I'm
glad you said that, the thing about student athletes going into the business, because just like, most people, especially in basketball or football, they're thinking, I want to get to the NBA or the NFL, and they don't think about like there's a very small select group of people who you have McDonald's All-Americans and grade All-Americans and whatever kind of All-Americans that never sniff those two leagues. But there's the business of it. It's so much wider. And when you leave, Kemet Mawakana of the Sam Jefferson, when he's at Georgetown, always talks about when you have played a sport, no matter what it is, at a D1 level, when you leave college, you have acquired, because of the large amount of time that you spent on the court or on the field, you've gotten the equivalent of a PhD in that sport. And there's so many things you can do with that knowledge outside of playing professionally, and people don't really capitalize.
Hey, can we get Pat? Can we talk about like I'm on the call with Gene Smith, man? Seriously, like Bebe Duran, right? I mean, Dikembe Mutombo. Can we talk about the impact that they had? It's amazing for a guy who balled at that time to now know and have relationships with y'all, man, for what y'all meant to an entire generation, multiple generations of Americans. It's amazing. I'll be walking through McDonough, and we complain about McDonough every day. We need a new McDonough. We need to upgrade it. And there will be people from countries from across the world that have traveled to the nation's capital, and in their itinerary, they've made a stop at Georgetown University. Come on, man. Those stories to me never get old. The impact that, Gene, that y'all had on the world, man. Nike, the culture. I mean, sometimes, man, you just got to think like, I'm walking around the arena and I see our alums and they're back and they come back, and man, I don't think y'all truly understand. I really don't think y'all understand being able to sit down with Coach Thompson, the good, the bad, the ugly, and hear it. God damn, y'all don't understand how impactful that is across the entire world and is to this day. I can't go anywhere. Mark talked about it. We travel across the globe on Georgetown business. I can't go anywhere where somebody doesn't see the G and want to reflect on how important that era Georgetown basketball is to people across the entire globe, man. And to be a small part of that, man, these stories never, ever get old. Hearing Mark Edwards talk about it, right? And the trip to Providence and that was crazy,
That was
right?
hilarious. That was hilarious. I don't know if our audience saw the last episode, but it's worth going back to that episode just to hear that Providence story.
Or to hear the brothers, the
That was
Durham brothers,
amazing.
man. People think about, you say, okay, who's your most favorite Hoya? First of all, I know when I was playing, I would have.
Well, Lee, pause for 1
night.
second, Lee. I was going to ask you, did you watch the 81-82
Yes.
NBA championship game? I was going to ask you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I watched all of them. I'm still mad at Villanova. I'm real mad at Villanova, man. That whole thing, the St. John's games, man.
Well, we got them the other day in soccer, so.
Yeah. But you know, I mean, just these stories. I tell Brian McGuire this all the time, man. I talk to Brian McGuire all the time because he was one of the few human beings living that had a front row seat to all of that. I remember we played a game. We were at Missouri when I first got here. We were playing Missouri in Kansas City in a neutral site game. And the game was over, and the young boys, Austin Freeman and Chris Wright and all those guys, they were balling. That was one of the best games. And we walk off the court and Brian says, that's one of the best Hoya games I've ever witnessed. And I'm like, wait a minute. You just said, for all the stuff you've watched, you said that was one of the greatest. I'm telling y'all, man, that's what fuels sort of all of us to want it to get back to where it belongs and needs to be. And so I appreciate all of y'all sticking with us, hanging in here, urging us in your way, whatever we can do, coming to the arena. We're looking forward to November 8th, but just the history of this thing, man. Again,
we can't thank you enough.
You can go to museum downtown. It's there. No, man, I know y'all talk about this a lot, but think about the guys that everybody says, okay, who's your best? I mean, Sleepy Floyd played here, man. I know Sleepy Floyd. I mean, that dude. I mean, all right, I'm sorry, but I'm just saying, y'all don't realize.
Hold on, Lee. I'm back
y'all do realize.
No, I'm glad you went
That's
down this path, because now I'm going to ask you something I usually ask people, but I wasn't going to ask you, and that is I want a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, your all-time Georgetown starting five.
Mark, I thought we were going to get off the call without that happening.
No, I'm not touching that.
You went down that rabbit hole, Lee, and I'm with you. Let's hear it.
Touching that
Lee, don't touch it, Lee. Leave it alone.
Here's what I will do, because everybody knows some of them. Here's what I will tell you. To me, man, I don't listen to that stuff, man, because but John Duran, Bebe Duran, he was
That's your one.
I didn't say it was my one. I'm saying.
Hey, Markham, I just think he's saying he's on the team.
He's on the spot. He's on the spot. But this dude here, this Gene Smith guy here, made defense sexy. I'm telling you, I played and I would have cold sweats. You didn't want to see him. You didn't want to see Gene Smith and his ball pressure. He made defense sexy. That is crazy.
I was at the Olympic trials for the team that Big John coached, and I won't call his name, but there was an All-American who could not get the ball across half court. He had extreme difficulty, and he did not make the team because of Gene Smith.
I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you. But Mark, man, you've been good. Hey, before we go, I don't know how much time we got. One of the questions we didn't get to, and I want to give a shout out to Frank Rienzo. There's not many people that understand sort of from the AD's chair, you know, Georgetown and the experience, and he, God rest his soul. He was. It is hard to be an athletics director who has had your fingerprints on the whole thing for a lot of years, to step away, but to still be in the community, still come to the games and strike the right balance between it's not my job anymore, but I'm here if you need me. And Frank Rienzo, the Godfather, did that as well as any human being you can't do it any better than how he did it. If I needed to pick up the phone and call him or go have a meal with him, and I asked him his opinion, he was absolutely there to tell me the real deal, not varnished, but to tell me the real deal. But he didn't try to like be the athletics director anymore. And that's a really hard thing to do. When you have seen greatness and been a part of greatness, you step away, you want to feel like you can control it even after you're done. And Frank Rienzo, for me as the athletics director and whoever else that came behind him, he was a big figure and an important and valuable asset and resource to me, man. So we missed it.
I want to jump on that Rienzo train too, just from the standpoint of just being in his presence. It's just one of those deals where God says few words, but what he does say matters and is meaningful. The way he carried himself, the way he was a representative of the program, of the school, of the university. It always warms my heart when I see any Big East program where they're talking about the beginning of the Big East and how it started. Yeah. And Mr. Rienzo is front and center in navigating that. So he's like, he's a triple OG. Yeah. So they're I always like using this phrase that Big John, when he talks about Patrick, Patrick is the period that ends all sentences. Yeah. Well, Frank Rienzo is the period that ends all sentences when you talk about ADs. So I'm glad you got to that and we didn't forget about that.
I hadn't forgotten about that. Rienzo was, especially during the time I was there, the Rayful Edmonds situation, well documented. He was very instrumental in protecting the Georgetown brand and making sure that things were handled and did not play. One incident I remember in particular when it first started popping off, we taped up the doors and no one was allowed in the practice. He walked into practice and pulled some players out, and that never happened. Like, it was always, so when that happened, we knew it was business. And to your earlier point, Lee, about saying that everything with the team is kind of, a lot of different parts working together, right? Even down to the managers. And I remember, I think it was an NCAA tournament game out here. I was in the hallway where the locker room was afterwards, waiting, for the team to come out, the coaches, so I could say hi to people. And he saw me, and it was almost like he was incredulous. Like, why are you out here? What you need to be in there. And he moved everybody out of the way, opened the locker room, and sent me in the locker room. Never forgot that. And his was in school with his daughter Teresa. Great people.
That's a great story.
Lee, we need you back because we can go on forever. We know you're a busy guy, but just want to know you got a standing invitation. Well, thank you for all the lovely things you said about Hoya locker room. and myself included. We really, like I said, we really appreciate your time. Obviously, you mean a lot to us. You mean a lot to the school. Continued success. Mr. Guerrero, I know you've been busy work-wise. Thank you for popping in. We love the work you're doing at Hoya Hoop Club. You've elevated elevated that group. You've elevated the communication. I look forward to more alumni, particularly from the basketball team, getting involved with Hoya Hoop Club. I know that's a challenge of yours, a charge of yours. But again, thank you for posting. And again, I always say it's a Sunday. You know, it's a day of rest. I know you guys are with your families, but thank you for coming through. Markham, if you want to take us home. But I look forward to having you both back when available.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Lee and Mark, for coming through. It's been a great show. Long time coming. Hope we get to do it again, Lee. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And when we had Mike Riley on, it came up about us trading quotes on the way to basketball games. And since we did that, I've been closing episodes using the one quote. This is very definitely a two-quote episode. So the first one I want to share is from Dr. Thurman Evans. If your brain can move your body with a split-second command thought, imagine what it can do with concentrated and directed thought. Read that because it took a whole lot of concentrated and direct thought to get Lee Reed to come on a Hoya locker room.
Hey, Lee, with that being said, Markham called me this morning, 20 minutes before the show, and goes, yeah, I talked to Lee. Before he could finish, I was like, yeah, I know he's not coming on.
Something came up.
Yeah, I messed with him. The last quote is, and I think this is very applicable to where we are today, especially with our basketball program. If you are willing to deal with the past, you can make the moment you are in rich. And that's Oprah Winfrey. So thank you for coming today. And I'm actually going to be in DC next week for the Black Alumni Summit.
Yeah.
So I hope I'll be able to catch up with both of you guys.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Hopefully Friday night.
And I think it would only be fitting and appropriate if it's the last thing we speak about is Dikembe Mutombo and his family. Lee mentioned it, but we certainly was not going to go without saying our prayers and our thoughts on a Hoya level,
Yeah.
right? Hoya Nation level, and hopefully it reverberates. He's our guy. He's an ambassador. I mean, he's global. He's international. Means the world to us. So we're just sending out our heartfelt wishes. And Markham, I know you have something.
Well, Romy.
Wish you well. Wish you well.
Yeah,
So,
I want to add to that on Dikembe. I was floored yesterday when I heard the news. Markham and I were classmates with Dikembe, and I've been friends with him since freshman year of college. He's an incredible person, as we all know, but what he's done as a humanitarian really across the globe is incredible. And I know that all of Hoya Nation is behind him. A lot of people reached out to me yesterday upon hearing the news, and we're praying for Dikembe and his whole family, and certainly Ryan. I know it's a tough thing, but love the man, and wish him the best, and just keep praying.
Yeah. Much better person, human being than a basketball player. Not even close.
And the only thing I want to leave you with, Lee, is another quote for you, because Markham's got me into bringing back my quotes. Just let people know, our culture is contagious. That's it, my friend.
Like that.
Thank you.
Thank you guys, man.
Be
Thanks.
well. We'll be in touch, all your family.
Thanks, guys.